Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to everyone.
Yes. Hi.
Turn
Hello.
my volume up a little. I think we're good to go. Okay, great. Good evening. Welcome to the November 22nd Board of Aldermen meeting. I now call this meeting to order, and I would ask everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic stands one nation under God, God indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Thank you. And before I forget, because I would probably forget at the end of the meeting, I want to make sure I wish everybody in town and country a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So I might have forgotten that at the end. I will now ask the city clerk to call roll for attendance.
Alderman Allen,
Here.
Alderman Even,
Here.
Alderman Holman,
Here.
Alderman Hughes,
Here.
Alderman Mortland,
Here.
Alderman Perot,
Here.
Alderman Weezahan,
Here.
and Alderman Whitmire.
Here.
Mary is presiding, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Relative to the minutes from the November 8th meeting, I seek a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And any discussion or amendment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I would ask the city clerk, are there any speakers from the community for tonight?
No, sir, no one signed up to speak at any point during the agenda. I'll clarify that again during the public hearings. And we also got no public comments for inclusion in the record.
Thank you very much. Public hearings, first one, a public hearing to consider a zoning code amendment related to the regulation of driveway gates, section 405.370.a.4 and section 405.470.a.10. I now declare the public hearing open. I would ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing published in the St. Louis County on November 5th, 2021. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing posted at the Municipal Center on the city's website and sent via Notify Me. And exhibit number 3 is bill number 2159.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Spencer would be present to answer questions. Are there any questions of staff or any discussion of this? And I would also again ask the city clerk if there are any public comments on it.
No, sir, none were submitted for this item.
Okay. I would then declare this public hearing closed. Second public hearing for the night is a public hearing on proposed 2022 budget for the city of Town and Country. I now declare the public hearing open. I would ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing published in the St. Louis County on November 5th, 2021. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing posted at the Municipal Center, Longview Farmhouse, the Firehouse, on the city's website and sent via Notify Me. And exhibit number 3 is bill number 2160.
Thank you. I would also ask the city clerk if from any of our citizens, if there have been any public comments on the budget.
No, sir, I've received none for this item.
Thank you. And then Joanne Jadali and Bob Shelton are present to answer questions. Are there any comments on the budget from the Board of Aldermen? Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this the point in our meeting tonight where we could have discussion, or will we do that at the point of first read?
I'm not opposed to some discussion at this point.
Okay, thank you. I talked to numerous people today, and I apologize. That was not a question I asked. Okay, I would just like to point out some support, acknowledgement, and areas of concern that some have had. The one thing that we have in the budget is the conference room remodel, and that is in the capital expense fund for $60,000. At this time, because of just a lot of the unknowns that we face, even though that fund is not unhealthy, I think that this would be a time that I would like to see us hold back on this $60,000 for this conference room remodel. I think the conference room looks fine, basically. I think that this is out of the capital expense fund, and I would like to see that fund be able to, at a later date, fund some, what some, I for one would think would be a more expansive project that I would like to build that fund. An example that I believe you, Mayor, or one of the individuals asked at one of our budget discussions is what would an example of something we'd like to see included in the budget that is not. And in the 4 years that, this being the fourth that I've been aware of the budget, we have foregone the issue of a maintenance shed. So I believe that all the equipment that we have, or most of it maybe, if not all, is left outside. And to me, it is just makes sense that we build infrastructure facilities to protect the investments that we make in equipment. So at this point, the conference room looks fine. The chairs are not the greatest. You lean back a little bit, you tip a little far, but you don't fall over. And so I think that based on our overall projections and potential needs, if not now, then later on, I'd like to see that 60,000 come out of the 22 budget.
Well, I would say that at this point, obviously tonight is not for amendments, but for just a general discussion. And I think that'd be a reasonable thing to bring forward. Obviously we try to cover everything that we think are expenses for the city for the upcoming year. And there are areas where perhaps we can be more economical, and we could look at that in terms of an amendment to the budget when we get to that point. But that's a fair point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Weezahan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had a few questions regarding the Parks and Stormwater budget. I forwarded some of them on ahead of time in preparation for tonight. Just one thing I wanted to ask Ms. Nixon to touch base on is, it came out of Parks and Trails, the recommendation to eliminate the part-time seasonal staff and apply those funds to the contractual services that we have, just to explain that process and how, how that might go for 22.
Ms. Nixon, if you would want to answer.
Would you like us to answer questions within the public hearing, or is it?
Let me defer for a second to actually either Ms. McNamara or Mr. Shelton about the procedure on that.
Yeah, I would, Mayor, if we could, like to stick to any general comments that the board may have. If we could try to address specific items administratively prior to our meeting on December 13th, I think that might be helpful. So if we could entertain just, I think, general feedback from the board, big picture conceptual items, I think that might be the most productive to start with.
I think that seems reasonable with the idea that believe it, our next meeting is 3 weeks away, to have some specific answers to those questions. Not only to Alderman Weasahan, but to the rest of the aldermen, to let all of us review it, would be the appropriate way to go. Alderman Whitmire.
So I guess in that spirit, our general fund revenues are off from our last full year before COVID by nearly $600,000. And they're off the 2018 numbers by $1.1 million. So they've gotten better, but we're still way off. So either tonight or at our next meeting or sometime between the two, I'd like to understand, you know, our team's thinking in terms of recovery and why they think it will recover with some level of specificity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable question in terms of, I think my own basic view of these things is that philosophically, when I've spent time looking at the budget and looking at some other things, that it seems to me we don't really have an expense problem here in this city, frankly. We have a revenue problem, which sounds sort of simplistic. But when I go back before I was mayor and last year, the year before on the budget, it seemed that when COVID hit, it seemed to me the city made a pretty concerted effort to hold expenses and hold costs down. And certainly I think that's been reflected in the comments from the audit that the city itself commissioned. I mean, their basic finding was your city, if you make mistakes, it's because your city runs too lean and you don't really have enough manpower, was basically their conclusion. So I think that from an expense standpoint, and I think that frankly, raises and things that we have done have not been over the top by any means. And so I think there's been a lot of things that were held in terms of expenses. Obviously our problem is revenue relative to sales tax, business license fees, other fees that we collect. And so, yeah, I think we have to specifically state how are we going to, I think our best bet is figure out a way to enhance revenues as opposed to, I'm not sure there's much in the way of expenses that we can improve without layoffs, frankly. And I don't think I have an appetite for that based on the report from the group that audited us. And from my own observation of how hard the people of this city work. So we need to, I do believe we absolutely need to have a pretty in-depth discussion about how we improve revenues. Simple thing is to say, let's initiate a tax. Maybe we need to do that, maybe not. Maybe there are other options, but I think to me, that's almost more of a philosophical question for the next budget as opposed to getting this budget in the books. And I think maybe we need to spend a lot of time talking about that as a board. But again, I feel that's almost more of an overriding philosophical question right now. And we do have a budget that we have to, get on the books and get going for next year. Probably not a great answer, but that's my take on it right now. Alderman Whitmire, go ahead.
I agree with everything you're saying. I think it does make sense to put together something to tell our citizens, if our revenues do not improve, what we would have to do in order to balance the budget and not further erode our reserves or consume them entirely. And I mean, describing fairly catastrophic things in terms of the way our city might operate. And I don't mean to be flippant, but I think our citizens do not understand the materiality of what we face here. And they think that we can just go in and cut things here or there, do without meetings or do without this or that. They have no idea how much we would have to do to make this change. And I mean things like shutting down the parks department. That's the only way you can get to big numbers that are sufficient to overcome this gap. And I'm not suggesting we do those things. I am suggesting that we provide examples to our citizens so they understand that the difficult situation that we're in and what we face if we do not do something materially different and from a revenue perspective.
I certainly don't disagree that we probably need to start an educational program with our constituents, with the citizens of town and country, that lays out where we are and how far we are from where we need to be in terms of balancing the budget, that at some point, obviously we have reserves, but they won't last forever. And that I think our best bet to move forward in a way that makes sense is to spend a fair amount of effort educating folks in our city about
Yes.
what the issues are. I think you have to be I think you have to be careful that it's not done in a threatening way, that if you don't do this, we're going to do that. If you don't, we're going to do this. It has to be done where, like, these are just the facts. This is what we're dealing with. This is where our revenues are and aren't. This is what we think we can do in terms of improving those revenues. And these are our options if our revenues don't rise to the level they are. I would think strongly that the huge majority of citizens of this city would not want to say, well, why don't we cut the police staff? Why don't we shut the parks? I think we're going to have to come up with a better solution. And I think, Mr. Dalla, did you have your hand up?
Yes, may I speak for just a minute, Mayor, please?
Sure.
I just wanted to mention some of the things that we looked at for the budget does have to do with things such as sales tax revenue, since it is 49% of our budget. And the belief is that those sales taxes will continue to come in, and we are continuing to recover from the pandemic. Concerns that I have, though, with increasing those numbers too dramatically are the supply chain issues, and we do not know how long that will take. It may take just a month or two, or it may be many months, and so that can impact us significantly. There were also questions that were brought to us with regard to business licenses and building and zoning permits, and I think we're in a good situation there where we will increase our revenues on those. But and we do have a great demographics here in town and country, and we are a very desirable location, so I don't see us having an issue there. But these are all great discussion items to talk about. I do think, though, that we do need to look at other revenue sources, perhaps property tax, or maybe utility gross receipts on residential properties and things like that, so that we are more diverse in our revenue sources and we're not so attached to sales taxes as a whole.
Thank you. I think the other thing that, and again, this is for just a general discussion tonight. Don't want to get down in the weeds, but there are some capital intense projects out there that we might have to look at pretty hard if that we could come pretty close to balancing the budget. So that's something else that I think we need to think about. Alderman Weezahan.
Thank you, Mayor. From a general philosophical idea of increasing revenues, we've had discussions both in Parks and Trails and with individuals about the appetite for increasing the amount of sponsorship for events. Is that we've had in the past portion of events such as fire and ice and concerts and like events covered by sponsorship? Is that, something that the board would like to see to where, our expectations are, closer to 75, 100%, something along those lines of having the expenses covered by sponsors?
No, I would agree, and I think we're certainly moving in that direction. I think we had some good movement on that last year in terms of getting sponsorships, and would
Yeah.
want to see that continue. But I think even if we had everything covered completely, we're still going to be a pretty far high from balancing a budget. But it's certainly an area where I think we absolutely, like I said, I think we made great progress last year with that, and with hope to continue to see that happen. Because I think it's a win for the city. I also think it's a win for the sponsors. Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd just like to say that the extent of the reserves that we had in 2019 served us very well and allowed us to get through 2020 and get to where we are with, a few changes, but we've made it. And that the amount of reserves that we have is a topic I think that I'd like for us to come back to, following again with Alderman Whitmire's comment about what we expect moving forward and philosophically, because certainly the last time Ways and Means did weigh in a year or so ago, it was to continue with the 50% reserves, but the prior year, the prior year, there were board members who thought we didn't need to maintain that. So I think going forward, certainly in January, there are these level of discussions that would be nice for the board to continue with. And I had a couple other topics to talk about, but maybe you'd rather I save these for next time because they were specific to items.
I think that might be appropriate then.
To go wait. Okay.
Right. And I'll get you in 1 second, Alderman Holman, but I would also say that I think there can be some discussion about what percent of you have in reserves, but regardless, at some point you got to balance your budget. So, I mean, that's the bottom line, no matter what you do. Alderman Holman.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for our city administrator, and it's with regard to mailings to our city. I'm making the assumption that we do not have a line item on the 2022 budget for hard copy mailings to our residents. Is that an accurate statement?
Ms. Jadali, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe we included any newsletter mailings, if that's the question.
That is.
We just have a little money in the budget for postcards. I don't remember the exact amount, but I can look it up and tell you in just a few moments.
Well, I don't need to know that number during this meeting, but I would say that, Mr. Shelton, I think I'll be calling you this week to ask what the cost of one mailer is. And then if we roll that out, let's say we have meetings on the budget end of first quarter into second quarter, and then we start this campaign, we want to probably hit our residents at minimum 4 times with some type of hard copy notification due to the fact that we have so little emails in our database. So just to understand what that number is and make amendment to our budget to add it in, we can do that on second read.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Been meaning to ask that for a while, so I'm be very interested to see.
What it is.
One other, I think it's $10,000 to $12,000 a mailing, but I'm Ms. Mack.
We do have a line item for newsletters and mailers in the admin budget where we used to do newsletters. Now we've got that to where we can do some postcards as well. So we can definitely get that number, but we did have Morgan check on hard copy mailers, how many, and I think we've got at least 3 in there this year. There's an $11,000 line item.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Alderman Even, please.
I have a question in regards to having us hold all of our budget questions until the next read on this. If we have concerns that we feel need to be made known or alterations that need to be made, kind of puts us on a tight timeline, given that the next meeting is 3 weeks from now. It's the second read and we are very close to the end of the year. So I feel like those are discussions that we should have during this meeting so that those alterations can be made.
Mr. Shelton.
Mayor, if I could, thank you. I'm not suggesting we not have any comment or question. Maybe if we put our questions out either tonight or in an email that the staff then gets back to you, rather than trying to come up with how much is in this line item for this particular item tonight on the spot, I think we can be more productive. And again, as the mayor suggested, the staff will distribute this to the entire board, all of the questions we get and all of the responses.
Sorry.
Please.
I feel like sometimes the questions being asked via email are not being answered completely. And sometimes it helps to have a two-way conversation about those, as well as to make those part of the public record.
Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually agree with Alderman Even. It seems like certainly we've been on Zoom for a long time and we have lost the opportunity for face-to-face communications. And with email, you never know when the email comes in and what the latest answer was or comment was. So even if we had another Zoom meeting for discussion, I think email is weak for discussion, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Well, certainly I don't want anyone to think that, gosh, I don't really have any input into the budget or my questions aren't being answered. So it's a long evening. We got time. Let's have a few questions. Alderman Even.
I have I guess a recommendation, given that we have a resident on for this evening, would it be appropriate to push this to when we read the budget item, or do we want to keep him on hold while we discuss the budget that might take a little bit of time?
Yeah, I would be certainly happy to alter the where we're going here. If is it pronounced Grow or Growy wants to speak? Is that who is the only person I see on here that I don't recognize?
It's Growy.
Growy.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor,
Please.
and Attorney Sleuth can stop me if I'm wrong, but since we are open in the public hearing and that is the time for discussion, we probably need to limit it to budget conversation right now. Perhaps the question is better, does anyone have anything specific for Mr. Growy? If he doesn't, he can bounce, but we'll still keep his item in the same place. I just don't know how we pause the public hearing, take up other business, and then come back.
Okay.
Since we're open right now for discussion, I think this is the right time to do budget talks.
All right, thank you. And Ed, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's cleanest. I mean, if it's the board's pleasure, you could theoretically suspend the public hearing for a period of time and take up other business, but obviously that might kind of confuse the hearing record a little bit.
Okay, all right, then we will stay in this public hearing and take questions. Alderman Allen.
Thank you. I have two more topics, so I'll talk quickly, and I apologize for speaking out, but I think it's important. Okay, as far as I want to confirm that the current admin salaries are within this budget at 3%. I'd like to remind people that this was 100% approved at our last Ways and Means We have a very conservative Ways and Means Commission, longtime members. They've have a lot of interest in town and country. They felt that this 3% should be hopefully enough to keep us competitive with all of our neighboring cities. In my opinion, we have significant pay range disparity in our city, and at this time of year, I think it's a great time for staff to be acknowledged for their merits and jobs well done. So I for one am very pleased that currently we have that 3% amount that then Mr. Shelton will, he's good job ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but that we do continue to keep that 3% in the budget. Also, I know over many years and discussions, the issue of branch chipping has come up. I've kind of done a turnaround, and I would like to think that after the second quarter, we could look at the revenues. I think that really after good discussions, and obviously Alderman Holman is always very clear on communications and how we really can look at benefiting the whole community if they would choose to partake in the branch chipping. And I think that if we had the revenues, the branch chipping is a great convenience and a great service, community service for our residents. And I would certainly make all attempt to communicate that information to more of the Ward 4 residents. It might cost a little more then, but I think it's a great service, and that could come back if we had the revenues. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of those two items.
Thank you. Alderman Weezahan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would like to go back to the first question, if you don't mind. Not so much on the specifics of the amount, but just kind of just to inform the board on the decision to change the position from a part-time position, how that affects the budget, the operations of the Parks Department, and move that into contractual service. So that was discussed at the Parks and Trails Commission, I believe 2 meetings ago. It was recommended to do, but just kind of wanted to see, give the board the opportunity to hear that change as well, coming from that department.
Either Shelton, can you take that?
Yes, I don't know if Ann's on. I can't see my full screen.
She is on.
I know it was to improve the level of service instead of hiring a part-time summer youth type individual, to just have our contractual people do this work who could do it more efficiently, who are doing it on a regular basis. I assume that was the discussion at the Parks and Trails meeting.
Ms. Nixon.
That's correct. It's so that we have professional contractual services performing those duties. Seasonal high school staff have been unreliable and hard to come by. So it's advantageous to have a custodial contractual employee there doing the work.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman Even, please.
I have some questions with regards to the rental of Longview Farmhouse or the pavilions. And looking through that, it looks like those numbers are staying the same. But we might have had a little bit higher number in 2021. So I'm wondering if there's a reason that we're keeping those numbers status quo versus continuing to work towards increasing the revenue from rentals for the pavilions and the Longview Farmhouse. So that was one of my questions that I would love to get an answer to. And then
That, and I'll let Ms. Nixon finish it, but I think the idea is they put in the budget, assuming that's the number, but they were gonna actively try to increase the number, but didn't want to overpromise on it. But I'll let Ms. Nixon answer that.
That's correct, especially as far as the Longview Farmhouse goes. As far as the pavilions go, we have a finite number of rentals. So we have essentially the weekends, 2 rentals a day per weekend. And so you'll see that those numbers are a lot more steady, even busier during 2020 than in previous years. But that's the reason for those sort of, if you look at those as sort of flat rentals.
I would like to try to make things as user-friendly for our community as we could, but if those pavilions are used a fair amount, what do you think would be, is it too good of a bargain? I mean, should we charge a little more than we do? I'm just asking, but like I said, I really want to, I certainly don't want to discourage our citizens from using these facilities, but maybe it's too good of a bargain. Go ahead, Ms. Nixon.
We are going to take that up in Parks and Trails for the beginning of the year, looking at all of our rental rates. We just raised them 2 years ago.
Okay,
But we'll just look to see how we are in the market.
thank you. Ms. Even, Alderman Even, I'm sorry.
so so you're saying that this is just kind of keep it status quo, estimate on the lower end. Do you have goals for the number that you would look for? I mean, typically I look to our expenses typically go up a little bit. Most of the time, if we're looking at revenue, we want in business, I think you look at trying to increase the revenue some way. Is there a plan to come up with a way to generate more revenue from the rentals of our facilities?
Go ahead, Ms. Nixon. Go ahead.
So when we look at the revenue projections, we look at previous years. Certainly we want to increase the Longview Farmhouse rentals. However, the pavilions, the way we're looking at increasing rental revenue is through the rental prices, since we are just about at capacity for rentals there.
And any thoughts about increasing the usage of the farmhouse itself? How we might go about doing that? Maybe working through the garden club or other ambassadors. I think it might be a reasonable thing to see if we can increase that volume.
Definitely.
Alderman Even.
So what does that plan look like? Because I think, how many rentals did we have of Longview Farmhouse this year?
I mean, I don't know that off the top of my head.
And based on what you were saying, it's my understanding that the pavilion rentals were fairly popular this year to where.
Correct, due to COVID.
Okay, so increasing that is going to be a difficult thing?
It would mean weekday rentals. And so increasing those, I think, is a challenge.
And hopefully things will improve, but there are still a fair number of people who are not doing functions that are indoors. I mean, there's an awful lot of people who have gone back. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, there's obviously a lot of people in there eating now, but there are still a fair number of people who I talk to who are like, no, I haven't been to a restaurant yet since COVID started, or I haven't, so I think hopefully, as the number of cases continues to diminish, and hopefully there's no new variants. Those are both sort of what stretches. Hopefully we will have more interest in people who are willing to go to an indoor function, and which I think would certainly try to help drive business. we'll see. Alderman Even, you have another question, I think.
Yes, just back to the rentals of Longview Farmhouse. Do we know approximately how much we made off of those rentals this year thus far?
Ms. Nixon.
I'm happy to do a full report and just share that with the full board so that we can look at how many rentals, what the revenue income is. We have a number of reservations that are for city meetings typically. So we haven't had those this year. They've been primarily outdoor reservations. But I can get you all of the rental revenue.
I think that'd be great. And if you would send it out to the board as a whole and myself.
Certainly.
Great. Thank you. Alderman Even.
One more question regarding that. So with regards to city meetings, are we talking about, Ms. Nixon, are we talking about city like subdivision meetings or what type of city meetings are we referring to?
So commission meetings or subdivision meetings are free of charge meetings.
Okay, so those free of charge then wouldn't be generating revenue. I guess I'm primarily looking for those that would be generating revenue. If we're looking at ways that we can increase revenue, whether it be sponsorships or increasing and setting a goal to increase our level of rentals in our facility to bring in extra income, those would be things that I would, in my opinion, would like to see reflected in our budget so that we have something to work towards instead of just trying to keep things at a status quo. I don't think that falls solely on you. I think we can help with getting the word out there to residents so that they know that these places can be rented and we can encourage those heavily. But I think keeping our number at $7,000 for a status quo is selling ourselves short, and we should look at trying to increase our revenue on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. Mr. Dolly.
I just wanted to mention that I know that there were questions not only about some of the revenues in the Parks and Stormwater Fund, but in other funds with regard to 2021 estimates. And you may realize if you look at your quarterly report that I hadn't updated those numbers. I stopped updating those a few weeks ago, so they're not going to be as accurate as actuals. And the reason for that is I couldn't keep updating revenues and then doing the expenditures in order to get appropriate reports to all of you to get the recommended budget. So you'll see that some of the numbers are off, but we were trying to do a best estimate for you. And Ms. Nixon couldn't update some of the numbers because I was busy updating and I wasn't providing her the opportunity to update those numbers any longer because I couldn't get any more, I couldn't do any more adjustments. I had to put a stop at some point. So I apologize. Part of that is my responsibility.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, Alderman Whitmire.
Thank you, Mayor. The last thing on my list. How's that? You like that?
I'm fairly ecstatic.
Capital Improvements Fund, we're moving, I'm sorry, the Road Fund and Capital Fund, we're transferring 131,000, a little more than 131,000 over to the Road Fund. And it looks like we're using the majority of that money to bump our road sealing budget compared to last year and the year before. I'd just be interested to know, I'm sure there was somebody on a commission somewhere that was arguing to keep the number flat, but we've chosen to increase it fairly significantly, which drove this transfer. I'd just like to understand that a little bit more.
Well, my understanding, because I asked a little bit about that, is that you're exactly right, but that if we don't keep up with sealing the roads, instead of spending an extra 130, we might spend an extra 360. And so you sort of, my understanding, talking to folks here, that you have to stay on top of this, or if you don't, it's going to cost you double or triple down the road. So even though it's an uncomfortable thing to do, I get this feeling from talking to people who know a lot more about it than I do. This is a necessary expense. And before I go back to Alderman Whitmire, I'd like to either Mr. Shelton or Mr. Zeltman, any other thoughts on that?
Michael, if you want to go ahead, you're more familiar with the road sealing than I am. And I believe it went through Public Works, so Alderman Holman may have some comments.
Yeah, Mr. Zeltman, feel free.
Thank you, sir. Actually, the lane mileage of roads is not increasing all that much in 2022. We are lucky in 2021 in that the road sealing that we did not have a whole lot of prep work to it. And by prep work, I mean concrete, curb, and gutter, which is very expensive. The roads that we're looking at in 2022 have a lot of concrete, curb, and gutter work, and that's where the price increase came in.
Alderman Whitmire.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Makes sense. So my question would be to the mayor's point around maintenance. Do we have an assessment of where our roads are in terms of their life, in terms of when the last time they were sealed and so forth, that we're operating off of kind of a fact-based approach toward planning, where that we know, I'm just going to make up numbers, right? We know we have to do all the roads every 10 years. We know these roads are in this point in the life cycle. And as a result, to keep up, we know we have to do this much this year, because, you pointed to the fact that the number of miles is pretty flat from last year. And if we have to do that number of miles every year to keep up, I have no argument.
Well, and I will defer again to Mr. Zucker, but I've been in a couple of meetings where they said, I think they rate the roads like A, B, C, or in terms of degree of repair, and boy, they're on top of it in terms of how many of our roads are A, how many are B, how many are C, and that kind of thing. So I think they've got a very rigorous quantitative approach to what we need to be doing on the roads here, at least from the meetings that I've been to in that regard. Mr. Shelton?
And Mayor, we did budget for a summer intern this year to go out and renew that rating, update it, and check all those roads.
Yeah, so I mean, there's been a pretty rigorous look at this. It's not like, well, we kind of think this is what we need. No, it's pretty hands-on. This is where we are with these issues. Alderman Weezahan.
Thank you. I had a question regarding, I know I brought it up at the work session at the last meeting regarding the trails at Longview and Drace being held off in 2020 and then again in 2021 this year. However, the total project for both of those will essentially triple from what was approved for the 21 budget. It's gone from 40,000 to 110, and then from 5 to I think 50,000 at Drace. I'm sorry, 7,500 to 50,000 at Drace. And I understand there was an engineering study done. And could you just touch base on kind of the findings and and a cost associated with that study?
I'm going to throw that to Mr. Shelton.
Yeah, and I'll throw it to Michael just as quick, but I will say that I apologize for any confusion. We're getting a price to do that study. We had 40,000 budgeted. We expect that cost to be about 10,000. The work that they'll do, I'll throw that to Mr. Zeltman.
The 40,000 was for the original trail or for the original study? The
trail, but we're going to take 10,000 of that approximately to spend on the study. We don't have the study yet, and we don't have a bid for the study.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, that answers the question. Thank you.
Alderman Whitmire, I thought maybe you're holding your hand up.
Yes, I was. Thank you. Just one last follow-up. I'm going to beat this dead horse one last time as far as the roads are concerned. Are we, so at the pace that we're going, are we keeping up? Are we working off more backlog because it's developed? Or are we accelerating? Which one is it? Where are we?
I think we're doing a little slightly better than keeping up. I think we're actually in pretty good shape in that regard. But I know that Alderman Holman's involved in this, and I let them and Michael Zeltman answer that also. But I think we are actually keeping up.
may I start the
Sure.
response and then Michael, you can
Sure.
pick up where I don't fill in all the blanks, but yes, we have been meeting with regard to roadway for quite some time in the Public Works Commission meeting. We're hearing often from residents about the status and conditions of our roads. Some of the points that our residents bring forward is the amount of money that they spend on the exterior of their property. And they would appreciate if the city would do the same with their roadways, keep it in the same pristine condition. Our purpose of every dollar that we spend, first and foremost, is on safety. And so whether we're sealing or striping or repaving it, safety is our priority. And that leaves really no money for any type of, I'm going to use the word beautification. But what we do utilize to rank our streets is the PACER scale, and it's a 1 to 10 scale. So what the commissioners are currently tasked with is to become really well versed with that scale. We've sent out a lot of information, a lot of visuals, and our commission is going to come back to you in first quarter and provide a recommendation of a standard on where we believe all of our roads should rank. So I would say by and large, we have very few roads, Michael, that hit 5 or under. We're pretty much around a 6 to a 10, depending on when that road was resurfaced. And I would say we're probably somewhere, if we would get all of our streets up to date, to around a 7, that would cost close to $2 million. And when we come back with this recommendation from our commission, we will also provide some historical information. I believe several years ago, Mr. Shelton, there was money spent out of, I don't know if it was capital or general, to bring several lane miles up to a 7 to try and get our entire city up to a 7, but that was several years ago. But we'll be providing all that historical information and reasoning behind where we believe our roads, what level we should maintain our roads at. And our commission hasn't established that, but we'll get that to you probably in first quarter. And that has been in the works for several months. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions.
That was great. Thank you.
Did I answer all your questions?
I'll
Alderman
follow,
Whitmire?
I'll follow up with one more. I won't beat this dead horse anymore.
Okay. Okay.
Those are great questions.
Thank you, Pam.
Yep.
I'm going to declare this public hearing closed. Moving on to appointments. Couple of appointments to the Parks and Trails Commission at their next meeting. One will be Linda Robson, formerly at Conservation, and Michelle Francisco, formerly on the Art Commission. So I'm thrilled that they're going to be added to the Parks and Trails going forward. I would now recognize the board's opportunity to provide reports if so deemed. Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. The Veterans and First Responders Task Force will have a meeting Monday, December 6th at 4:30 at Town Square in the Maintenance Building. And we will then be reviewing the request for qualification submittals. So hopefully we are moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Even.
I just wanted to say that Fritz and I had our Alderman Weesingham and I had the pleasure of going and meeting with a group of upper school students over at Principia this past week. They were extremely curious about local government, asked questions, and had great discussion for an hour and a half until the teacher made them stop asking questions so that could wrap quickly. But we had a great time with them, and several actually have asked about local things on our agendas and expressing their wishes for those. So we have encouraged them to come and join us when we come back in person or to attend any of our commission meetings. But it was a great time.
Right.
It was a great thing for you and Alderman Weezahan to do. Thanks for doing that. That was great.
Thank you.
Very much. Alderman Whitmire.
Thank you, Mayor. So at the most recent meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we did at least three things. Three I remembered anyway. One, we approved the redevelopment of the gasoline station at 2721 North Ballas into a convenience store with gasoline sales. And that is at the corner of Ballas and Clayton, for those who don't know. All but one commissioner voted in favor of that proposal. Secondly, we did approve a zoning text amendment to establish some regulations pertaining to the use of portable storage units and dumpsters on residential property. And then lastly, we discussed potential changes to our city code regarding grand trees.
And I would say on that vote, that was almost unanimous to approve the going forward with the convenience store and the gas station. That it was pretty close to being unanimous. It was sort of a reluctant no on part of it. So I felt real good about where that commission came out. Alderman Moreland, did you have your hand up? Please go ahead.
I did. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everyone, Chief Cavens and the TCPD and West County EMS are sponsoring a toy drive. And West County EMS has put us in a competition with the Manchester Police Department. It's called Donations, so donations with donuts. So all the way up to December 15th, TCPD, that you can drop off toys for kids in the municipal center, and they'll be taken over. And then Chief Cavens created a little team morale and some other fun activities by having a no shave November, and his fellow teammates have been participating by donating money to No Shave November and having fun as a team helping others. So thank you, Chief.
Alderman Morton, thanks for mentioning that. I appreciate that. And Alderman Weezahan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Parks and Trails Commission met last week. We reviewed, had a review of the year, went over a lot of the accomplishments. I did have one commission member, Steve Korbecki. He wanted me to relay a message to the board, just his appreciation for, as I mentioned previously, that we did receive the grant for Grace Park. He wanted to express his appreciation for everyone involved with that project, especially the commission members and the residents that participated in the input and being able to achieve that this year.
Thank you.
It's good.
Mr. Shelton, do you have a report? No. Okay, great. All right. Before we go on, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the board will return to in-person meetings at our next meeting, which is December 13th. And while the meetings will be live streamed, participation by elected officials and members of the public must be by physical attendance, just so you're aware of that. My favorite little fascination now is I like to get an update every time on Topping Road project, Mr. Zeltman.
Contractor delivered materials last week, prepped the site for construction, removed the plant material in the right of way, installed installed a Johnny on the spot and other various items to get started. If you've driven by there recently, you've seen that they've done quite a bit of work on the radius of topping at Clayton Road. So that's where they're at now.
So you would say to date, we're on track?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Good.
And Ms. Nixon, I know we have the turkey trot coming up, and any other winter events coming up that you could talk about for a second?
Certainly. We just had our holiday boutique on the 13th of this month. Good attendance, and a number of the vendors sold out, so that was good. to have a lot of participation.
That's good.
Turkey Trot is on Friday at Longview Farm Park. So please come join in the fun. Then we have our next holiday event would be Photos with Santa, and that is on December 11th at Town Square.
Okay, great. And I think Mr. Shelton does have an announcement.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the board that December the 8th at 11 a.m., the state auditors will be coming in. They have requested to have a closed session with the board. So that will be here at City Hall, 11 a.m., December the 8th, and that will be posted and we will be sending you notifications.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, moving on to unfinished business, substitute bill number 21-44, sponsored by Aldermen Perot and Allen. Without objection, would the city clerk read the substitute bill for the second time?
Substitute Bill number 2144 is an ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 125, Boards, Commissions, and Committees of the Town and Country Municipal Code, specifically by enacting Article 3 to establish an Economic Development Commission.
Thank you. And I seek a motion to approve in a second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. And I believe Alderman Perot is going to make a motion to continue this bill indefinitely. Is that correct?
That is correct. I do make a motion to continue this bill indefinitely.
And I would seek a second for that. Alderman Allen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Also, before we go to the next bill, I have asked Alderman Perot to serve as Chamber of Commerce liaison. I think there's some potentially exciting things that might happen. And I think having one of the aldermen who has an interest in this area interact with the Chamber of Commerce is a very good thing. And he has graciously accepted taking that position. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. Number two, bill number 21-58, without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the second time?
Bill number 2158 is an ordinance approving a boundary adjustment plat for 12200 and 12211 Wheatley Grove Road in the city of Town and Country, and authorizing the boundary adjustment plat to be recorded in the office of the Recorder of Deeds of St. Louis County.
I seek a motion to approve in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or amendment? Alderman Whitmire.
Mayor, I'd just like to report that Planning and Zoning Commission voted in favor of this unanimously.
Right, yeah, they did
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you for that. I would ask the city clerk for a roll call vote.
And Mayor, before I call the roll, I'll just note for the record that Mr. Grohe has remained on the meeting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's an excellent budget discussion tonight. Thank you. Yes.
Sure you're thrilled.
Alderman Holman,
Aye.
Alderman Hughes,
Aye.
Alderman Allen,
Aye.
Alderman Weezahan,
Aye.
Alderman Perot,
Aye.
Alderman Even,
Aye.
Alderman Mortland,
Aye.
and Alderman Whitmire.
Aye.
The bill passes unanimously and becomes ordinance number 4471.
Congratulations. All right,
Congratulations.
that's great. All right. You're welcome to stick around. New business. Bill
Guess I'll
number
have coffee afterward.
21-59. I would seek a sponsor for the bill. Perhaps Alderman Whitmire.
Yes, sir, I would.
Thank you. And without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2159 is an ordinance amending Title IV, Chapter 405, the zoning regulations of the Town and Country Municipal Code, by the amendment of section 405.370.8.4 and section 405.470.8.10 regarding conditional uses in certain zoning districts, specifically single-family driveway gate regulations.
Thank you. Bill number 21-59 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 21-60, I would seek the board as a whole to sponsor without objection. Would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2160 is an ordinance approving the budget and authorizing budget expenditures for the budget year beginning January 1, 2022.
Bill number 21-60 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 21-61 would seek a sponsor for the bill. Maybe I would think the board as a whole. And without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2161 is an ordinance regarding the rate of compensation of employees of the city of Town and Country and repealing ordinance number 4332.
Bill number 21-61 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2162 would also see the board as a whole as a sponsor without objection. Would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2162 is an ordinance authorizing an agreement with Standard Insurance Company for participation by the city of Town and Country in a group life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance plan and a group long-term disability insurance plan for its employees.
Bill number 21-62 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2163, which I also would think would be sponsored by the board as a whole without objection. Would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2163 is an ordinance authorizing an agreement with Delta Dental of Missouri for participation by the city of Town and Country in a group dental benefit plan for its employees.
Bill number 21-63 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Next is bill number 21-64, would also assume the board as a whole would sponsor without objection. Would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2164 is an ordinance adopting a voluntary vision care benefit plan through IMED for the employees of the city of Town and Country.
Bill number 21-64 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 21-65 would also think this would be sponsored by the board as a whole. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2165 is an ordinance approving a fire protection and ambulance service agreement with West County EMS and Fire Protection District for the provision of fire and EMS services in the city of Town and Country and authorizing a lease agreement related to same.
Bill number 2165 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2166, also the board as a whole, without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2166 is an ordinance of the city of Town and Country, Missouri, authorizing and directing the submission of a ballot proposition to the qualified voters of the city of Town and Country, Missouri, to consider imposing a local use tax at the same rate as the local sales tax of the city of Town and Country, Missouri, for purchases from out-of-state vendors.
Bill number 21-66 is continued to the meeting of Monday, December 13th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 21-67. This one, I will not ask the board as a whole. I would just seek a sponsor for this bill. Alderman Perot, Alderman Allen, Alderman Holman, and without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2167 is an ordinance approving a deer management plan and authorizing a wildlife management service agreement between the City of Town and Country, Missouri and White Buffalo, Inc. for professional deer management services.
Bill number 2167 is continued to the meeting on Monday, December 13, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Next, we're on to the warrant list. The warrant list is small for us, $65,524.08. I seek a motion to approve in a second.
So moved.
By Alderman Allen, seconded by
Second.
Alderman Hughes. Any discussion or amendment?
No. I didn't have any changes to that one.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. I do not have any other announcements. Already wish everybody happy Thanksgiving. So Alderman Holman, if you have something to bring up,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you, Mayor. I have a request for our next meeting for you and or our city administrator on two of our bills, Bill 2165 and 2166. With 2165, that is our largest line item on our budget, and it took us over a journey of a year between task force board members, task force members and our city attorney and city staff to come to this agreement. So if that just could be highlighted and outlined for our community, because we might sit silent on that one topic on December, whenever we meet, December 13th.
13th, right.
Yeah, so they might be confused on why would we sit silent on such a huge item. So just to give them a little background information there, I think would be beneficial to our community. And then
That's a great idea.
similar request for 2166.
Okay.
Maybe just a little bit more information for our residents and real life example maybe of what that means with regard to that ordinance, if it should pass. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Weezahan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to request to also be a sponsor for Bill 67 for the deer management. And then also just to echo Alderman Holman, we had a neighborhood meeting last night about the use tax. And one of the questions that got brought up, and maybe we could have an explanation, if there is if someone's purchasing something already and they already see a local tax on there, would that be additional, or would we just be that amount just be applied to us rather than to the county or just getting our share of it? So if that could be discussed as well.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you. Alderman Whitmire.
Yes, Mayor. This past week was Veterans Day, and certainly want to give our thanks to our veterans. But to that point, I became aware of veterans speaking before high schools in the local area, and just wondered if the alderman would like to just think about, is that something that might fit into our agenda to help arrange that for the local high schools within our borders? Maybe it fits within the task force that's underway that's arranging the memorial. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's something you don't want to do. But I just thought I'd bring that up while it's top of mind with the recent week.
I appreciate that. Honestly, taking care of a few veterans, younger veterans, that although we're not in any hot wars right now, during our times and where we're in hot wars, we have a fairly small army, and I don't think we appreciate the number of times some of these young men were put in deployments in harm's way. Several of them maybe were deployed 6-7 times, whereas in previous times in this country where the army was much larger, that didn't happen as much. And so we really do owe an extreme debt of gratitude to these young men and women who have who had consistently, at a period of time, things are more quiet now, and thank God for these young men and women, but some of them were put in harm's way way more often than they should have been. frankly. So I would be totally in favor of that. Alderman Allen.
Thank you. Just briefly, I do appreciate Alderman Whitmire's comment, and I very much agree. And I will bring that up at our next task force meeting. Thank you.
I seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, I would assume is aye. And
Aye.
have a great Thanksgiving.
Everybody have a nice holiday.